Hello. All right. All right. Looks like this is everybody. Hey, hey. All right. We're all fed, and hopefully we're not going to fall asleep. What's up, everybody? All right. So this is part 2. This is from a presentation called "The Replacement Gods." We actually have it on DVD. It's a full-length documentary. Really timeless masterpiece. Like, I've watched it many times and I'm always impressed by it. This one and Pseudology are my favorite of the documentaries. But this one's going to be all about superheroes, and we're going to see a common theme through all these superhero movies, and it's going to be just like what we were just talking about, like this Gnostic theme. You're going to see it over and over and over, and it can't be a coincidence. To call it a coincidence would just be crazy because of how much evidence there is. So the question is, can fictional stories have an influence? What do you guys think? Yeah. I mean, think about The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Why do we tell these stories to our children? Because they're just, a story to put them to sleep? No, we're hoping they're going to get a message out of it, right? We're hoping they're going to get the moral to not lie over and over, because the moral of the book is, this tale concerns a shepherd boy who repeatedly tricks nearby villagers into thinking a wolf is attacking his flock. When a wolf actually does appear, the villagers do not believe the boy's cries for help, and the flock is destroyed. The moral of the story is that liars will not be rewarded even if they tell the truth. No one believes them. So there is a moral. There's a lesson to learn and to be received from hearing fictional stories. Another example is The Lorax by Dr. Seuss, and basically it's talking about the environment and everything, and on the end of this it says, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So we read these stories to our children. We pick stories that have a good lesson. We want our children to grow up knowing the truth and not some of these lies. Jesus knows the power of fiction. In Matthew 13:34, it says, all these things Jesus spoke to the multitudes in parables, which is a fictitious story. And without a parable, he did not speak to them. So Jesus knew that to get his message, to get the truth to people, they would remember it if he put it in a story. Stories are memorable. Music is memorable. A lot more than sitting and listening to a boring lecture. If you wrap it up in a story or make an illustration out of it, it sticks with people more. And Jesus knew that. So how does Satan counterfeit this? He knows the power of storytelling. He does it through media. Parent Map is not a Christian website, and they say 15 movies that help kids do the right thing. That's interesting. They think that movies have an impact on children. And it says, we parents work hard to teach our kids to do the right thing. Doing the right thing conversations are not always easy to have, which is why we recommend an unexpected strategy to help. Watch a movie. Here is a list of films with powerful stories of kids championing everything from gender equality to ethical treatment of animals. So this is a non-Christian website. This isn't just the idea of a Christian who thinks that media has influence. Then it goes the other way too with Screen Rant, also not a Christian website, says 10 children's movies that have terrible moral lessons. Not a Christian saying this. And it says, cinema shapes young minds. That's powerful. Cinema shapes young minds. But what if these beloved kids' films actually have awful messages? Look no further than A Christmas Story or Home Alone. And it says, they're talking about the Moana movie. It says, one of the biggest moments in the film is when Moana defies the commands of her parents and sets out on the ocean alone. Though an inspiring moment, it also seems to suggest that if there is something a kid really wants to do, they don't have to listen to their parents at all. I mean, if you look at it, if we have a video called The Disney Deception, and it's about 8 minutes long, and you're going to see example after example after example of Disney and other cartoons saying, break the rules, follow your heart. That is the message that these kids shows are putting out. Children imitate fiction. I've seen videos of a child thinking he's Superman. He jumps down the stairs like this. Kids, when they watch these movies, they're gonna imitate it. Do you think it's going to stop with just thinking that they have a superpower? No, that's going to be the whole mentality of the movie. What if we had a comic book called Super Nazi? Would you let your kids read that? Why not? It's just fiction. It doesn't have any influence, right? We like to think that we're in control of our own minds, and it's like, you know what, it's just fiction. I can watch whatever. But when it comes to this, it's pretty universally agreed, like that's not a good thing. We're not going to tell our children that the Nazis were superheroes. And would an atheist be offended if I read these fictional comic books to their child I was babysitting? You think if I was babysitting an atheist child and I was reading The Christian Crusader, do you think they'd have a problem with that? Oh yeah, they're going to say, stop indoctrinating my child with your religion. I could just say, well, it's fiction. But they know that this is influential. But when it seems to go the other way, we want to say, no, it doesn't really have an effect on me. If media didn't have an influence, there'd be no such thing as a cancel culture. Why would you cancel something if it has no influence or effect on people? There'd be no demand for representation. You know, we want this many minorities and all this. We want representation. Why? Because it does have influence. This is an LGBTQ website, not Christian at all, obviously. And it says, what is media? And it says, media representation is a powerful tool for shaping cultural understanding of people, places, and groups of people like those identifying as LGBTQ or another non-gender conforming identity. So they see the power that media is a powerful tool for shaping cultural understanding. That's why they want representation. That's why these groups are demanding that in a couple of years they want 50% of representation in movies. And this is a group that's maybe 6 or 7% of the population. The media we are most often exposed to in modern Western life are television, including streaming services, social media, movies, plays, musicals, magazines, newspapers, and even radio are still influential messengers of the cultural zeitgeist. So when you just ask the world at large, they're going to understand that media has an influence. Media has impact. It's powerful. Is there anything wrong with this picture? Do you see anything wrong with it? Anybody? Yeah, do you think Jesus would be reading Superbale to children? It's just fiction, right? It's a superhero book. No. God constantly told people, don't even say these heathen deities' names out of your mouth. Have nothing to do with them. And yet, whether you know it or not, a lot of these superheroes are admittedly Roman and pagan gods repackaged, and they will admit it themselves. Heroes are very dark. Strike Force, Hellstorm, Satana, the devil's daughter. These are the superheroes that are being put out in comic books. And they don't even hide the religious aspect of it. We got the lost gods. We got the Trinity and the God Squad, and yet this guy has a pentagram on his chest. They openly will tell you that these are gods, and they're lost gods, and they're the Trinity, a counterfeit Trinity. CBR is comicbookreview.com, not a Christian website. And this is what they say. They say that Superman, Batman, Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman, all of them collectively stood in for the classic gods they most resemble. Another reason is that it had some fantastic storylines, some of which are rooted fundamentally in classic mythology. I'm not saying this, they're saying this. In issues 6 through 8, for example, the team fights actual angels. They fight actual angels that threaten Earth. One angel, Zariel, even fights side by side with the team. So we know that Jesus and his angels are going to come to Earth. And is it going to be a threat to those who aren't on his side? Yeah, because the earth is going to be purged with fire. And yet these mythical gods are going to fight against those angels. That's what they just said here. But more importantly, as gods, characters like Wonder Woman, for example, are shown being stronger and wiser, while Superman is at the peak of his powers. Batman, meanwhile, plays the ultimate god of the underworld. He's not just a bat. He's the god of the underworld. He's based off of Hades. His iconography is that of a demon. That's what the artist said, and we'll see a clip of that. Some of them don't even hide the god aspect. This is Thor, who is a Norse god, and they're not even hiding that. Exodus 23:13 says, "And in all that I have said to you, be circumspect and make no mention of the name of other gods, nor let it be heard from your mouth." What if you're sitting here reading their names and saying that he's going to save the earth? See, we're glorifying these gods. We're not just saying it. I can say his name because I'm saying this is wrong, but imagine if you're reading a book that's glamorizing them and making them the heroes of earth. So this is the replacement gods, and we're going to see a clip here.
The ancient gods of Greece and Rome and Egypt still exist, only today they wear spandex and capes.
Superman is Zeus, Batman is Hades, Aquaman is Neptune, and they kind of fit into the pantheon of gods in all the different cultures.
Superman is as much of a Moses figure as he is a Christ figure. You know, is coming from another world, you know, having all this power and really saving lives.
Our redemption is not going to come from here, goes the myth. Instead, we'll be saved from the outside.
Batman, the Dark Knight detective, Gotham's greatest protector. His parents killed before him at an early age. He is the world's greatest detective. He's the world's greatest escape artist, and he's arguably the world's greatest hand-to-hand combatant. He also has $1 bazillion, and that's not somebody you want to go up against.
One of the reasons that Batman has been so popular for so long is his iconography is that of a demon. Look at the paintings of medieval paintings of devils in museums, the Batwings, the Horns. He looks like something that's dark and evil, and his origins are in an act of murder, and yet he's on your side.
Wonder Woman is a perfect transition from the ancient myths. There are echoes of the Amazons in Homer's writing that refers to a tribe of women that lived without men, that were terrifyingly efficient soldier warriors.
Flash, the fastest man alive, can move at speeds near the speed of light, can outrace a bullet to its target, can run up the side of a building, can actually cross the ocean before he has time to sink.
There's the old Flash, and then there's the new Flash. The old Flash is a perfect counterpart for Hermes or Mercury in the old myths. You know it immediately when you see the helmet with the wings on it. It refers to the god of the messengers. In a fascinating way, the artists who are creating today's comics are doing heroic work by taking the timeless tales that began in the world of men and bringing them into the future.
Are you with me?
So that's clear, right? That's not my own opinion at all, right? These were the artists themselves telling you these are Greek, Roman, Norse gods repackaged, and Batman's a demon, and he's also Hades. So Superman, you would think he has like this Christ-like parallel. He comes to Earth from out there to save humanity. And look, what are his parents' names? It says, look, Mary. It's a child. Mary is the wife's name. And then when you look at his dad's name, Joseph, or Jonathan Joseph Kent. So Mary and Joseph adopt a child from the heavens, from another planet that comes to Earth. We see the clear biblical parallels here, which seems like a good thing, except that his mission is not the same as Christ's.
On Krypton, I was intending it to be almost semi-biblical, and people spoke in very stilted, elegant English. The metaphor was clearly there when Jor-El sends Superman to Earth, of God sending Christ to save humanity.
We'll travel far, my little cloud.
So they don't hide it. He's saying that there's all these biblical things. But when you look at Superman, does he have the same mission as Jesus? He's not coming to set people free from their sins. He's not coming to preach repentance. In fact, he's shacking up with Lois and all these things that Jesus would never do. So what is that doing to our picture of Jesus? Here he was, once he came to earth, he was in this Siberian wilderness, just like Jesus went out into the wilderness before he started his ministry. And how old is Superman?
Age?
30.
30 years old, the same age that Jesus was when he started his ministry. There's no mistake. This is not just a lot of coincidences over and over. Like I was saying, these people put a lot of investment into what they're writing. A lot of writers will tell you that they got their scripts from a dream or from automatic writing, from channeling. These people are open about this stuff. The Hollywood Reporter also pointed out that he was like a Christ type, and that he gets stabbed in the side and he falls to earth in a crucifix pose. That was not a mistake. They actually, when one of the later movies came out, they started releasing packages to pastors of how you could show the movie at your church and then do a little Bible study on it. They were marketing Christians. So they're targeting Christians. We want to get this false Jesus into the church and make a Bible study out of it, and the Christian world is eating it up. And you can see all the people are raising their hands to Superman as he has these angel wings. But here is Smallville, where he's on a cross, which is another blatant parallel. But what happens? He's taken down off the cross. What if Jesus would have come down off the cross? None of us would have salvation. And here's some of the parallels where he gets stabbed in the side and he falls to earth in the shape of a cross. They openly admit all these were purposeful. The blur savior of the city. Superman Returns 2006 said Jesus of Nazareth spent 40 days in the desert. By comparison, Superman of Hollywood languished almost 20 years in development. Okay, this is where they're talking about, giving the sermons to the pastors and things. So what was Christ's mission? Daniel 9:24 says, to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in an everlasting righteousness. But that is not the mission of Jesus. Superman, see, it's so close, I'm getting confused. Superman's mission is to save people from these things that are happening on earth. Matthew 1:21 says, and she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. That was Jesus' whole mission. Not necessarily to save you from impending doom that's happening on earth, like all these superheroes do. Here we see a scene where every knee will bow.
That's the guy trying to do the right thing. They don't better not have hell. Devils don't come from hell beneath us. No, they come from the sky.
Devils come from the sky. So notice every knee bowed, and he said, devils don't come from beneath, they come from up in the sky. So again, we're being told this message to fear something that's coming from out there. Even though this is the bad guy talking, it's all this is going in. And why would you put some kind of anti-Christian theme in a movie? What's the purpose? If this is just pointless entertainment, like people say, hey, it's just, it's innocent entertainment, we can just watch it. Why would you have a scene like this where he's literally blasting God and saying that God isn't real?
The problem of evil in the world. The problem of absolute virtue.
I'll take you without breaking you, which is more than you deserve.
The problem of you on top of everything else. You above all. Because that's what God is. Morris, Apollo,
Jehovah?
Clark, Joseph, Kent. See, what we call God depends upon our tribe, Clark Joe. Because God is tribal. God takes sides. No man in the sky intervened with me. Boys will live me from daddy's fist and abominations. I figured out way back. God is all powerful. He cannot be owned. They need to see the fraud you are with their eyes. The blood on your hands.
So this is the mindset of atheists I hear all the time. They always say, if God's all powerful, he can't be all good. If he's all good, he can't be all powerful. Why is there, children with bone cancer and this and that? They always want to try and defame God and say, but that's the thing. With atheism, they talk out both sides of their mouth. It's like, well, how come he doesn't judge? How come there's all these bad things happening in the world? But then you point back to the flood, and they'll say, well, why did he wipe out a bunch of innocent people? God can't win with these people. Because they always like to bring up the fact that God killed all these people in Sodom and Gomorrah and the flood, but at the same time they'll say, why doesn't God bring judgment? So they want to not believe and have a reason to, and it's seeds like this that go into the mind of people.
And now God wants to lie rebel.
So this is Grant Morrison. He's a comic book writer, and he's going to tell you where he gets his stories from. He's going to tell you that he gets them from the spirit world, from a Gnostic Jesus who told him that he was going to die, and the only way to keep from dying was to share this gospel with the world.
I was sweating constantly. I was getting fevers and having these shakes and rigors, and then freezing. I just couldn't get up anymore, and I lay in front of the fireplace in my house.
And when he thought he was going to die, when he broke down in tears, and he was delirious, man. Delirious.
And suddenly this giant column of light comes through the door. And bear in mind, I'm hallucinating. This was one of the most amazing hallucinations I've ever had. And it's Jesus. The first thing he said was the thing I put in the comment. Just this voice suddenly announced itself. I am not the God of your fathers, I am the living stone that breaks all hearts. So then he said, well, okay, you're ready to die now, but you don't have to die. And so, I really don't want to die. What do I have to do? And he said, well, if you want to stay here, you have to work for us. You have to spread the light.
So he talks about how when he was drawing this comic book character that was kind of a comic book character in his own image, he was drawing things that were happening to him, including the guy breaking out in boils, and then he had boils. Everything that he was drawing was happening in his own life. And so he drew the character on the verge of death, and now he's about to die, and he has an interaction. A manifestation of Jesus appears to him and tells him, I'm not the God of your fathers, I'm actually the Gnostic Jesus, and you don't have to die. He said, well, what do I got to do to not die? He said, you got to write this message and share it with the world. So he's literally an evangelist for false Jesus. And he's openly admitting this. So while you're reading these comics by this guy, that's what you're getting. That's the story you're getting from the demon realm. Now here's the same artist along with a musician named Gerard Way, who is a comic writer as well. And he's going to tell you that we're like the new prophets. We're writing the new Bible, an ongoing series of the Bible. So he knows that there is a spiritual agenda here.
Being fans of something, be it from Buffy to Superman, anything else, the real diehard fans, I think there's almost a reason that they call us all disciples in a weird way, because I do think there's that connection of mythology that we almost take it so personally, because it is, in a lot of weird ways, and people are going to hate me for saying this, religion or mythology. It's our guideline to get our moral code and our integrity and our courage. We actually use them as a basis, and then it made me think, well, if that's the case, and it actually is, like pop culture is actually the new mythology. So if that's the case, like what a crazy power that any of us wield. I described it to him as it's almost like you're doing an ongoing series of the Bible.
An ongoing series of the Bible. He says that we're getting our moral code from pop culture. That's a scary thought. You look at the music that's out there, the movies, the cartoons, they're all pushing this agenda. They're putting these minorities, the LGBT and everything, they're putting them into these cartoons and uplifting a 1% of the population. And that's where we're getting our morals from. The Justice League, it might be hard to see it, it says God's among us underneath there.
The big climax to Grant's run near the end of the 90s was World War III, which climaxed with every man, woman, and child on Earth temporarily inheriting superpowers so that they could team up with the Justice League to fight off
to fight
Most
Armageddon.
amazing sight. 6 billion people all rising from the earth, all flying. Look up in the skies. It's 6 billion people.
So again, think of Revelation. Think of what it says. It says that that Satan is going to unite the armies of the world together, that they're all going to battle Christ. He just said that 6 billion people got superpowers to fight Armageddon. Armageddon is the revelation of Jesus Christ. So we see that, I don't know if this is real or not, but we're going to go into Batman here. And remember, he said that Batman
His iconography is that of a demon.
is based off of a demon. And here you see it, Tales of the Demon. And here is a Batman comic, issue number 666. And it says Batman. And if you notice, there was fire on a city. What city was that? Here we find out that it is, where does it say it? So appearing in Batman in Bethlehem. Bethlehem was set on fire as Batman is looming over the city in his comic number 666. He's the hero, guys. This is not the villain. Here we see a lot of, pentagrams and occult type things. And here it says, in return for my soul. This whole thing was talking about how Batman sold his soul to the devil. And a lot of people aren't picking that up when they're watching these, newer movies, but this is where it's coming from. Even the old Bang Pow stuff had a lot of this Egyptian mythology in it. Now, if Batman is a demon, then who are the bad guys based off of? They'd probably be based off of things like Christ, right? So in Batman Returns, the bad guy, the villain, was the Penguin. And his parents saw him and he was hideous. They threw him in a basket in a river, like a Moses type, which was a Christ type. And they even say it in this book, where they say, Strick gained inspiration from a Moses parallel that had Penguin killing the firstborn sons in Gotham. Who killed the firstborn sons in Egypt? Well, it was God. He killed all the firstborn sons, including Pharaoh's son.
It's time. These are the names of the firstborn sons of Gotham City. Just like I was. And like me, a terrible fate waits for them.
So you see how they're painting God as the villain. The one who's killing the firstborn sons, the one that was put into the basket in a river, and was born coincidentally, I'm sure it's just a coincidence, on Christmas Day. So he's born on Christmas Day, put into a basket in a river, and died at 33 years old. Is this a coincidence? That's like way too many things to just call it a coincidence. I think people think you're crazy for pointing this out, but I think it's crazier to think it's all a coincidence. Two-Face was the bad guy in the Batman and Robin movie. And when you notice the hideout, the secret lair, what do you notice on the back wall here? Is that a face with a crown of thorns? So there's a face with a crown of thorns, and then notice the interesting furniture. We have an animal on a burning altar. We have the 7 candle branch stand over here. We have the smoking incense. This is the sanctuary. The bad guy's hideout is the sanctuary with a face with a crown of thorns on the back. And Two-Face has a day job. He's actually a lawyer. So the bad guy is an upholder of the law, the advocate whose hideout is the sanctuary. And 1 John 2:1 says, "My little children, these things I write to you so that you may not sin. And if anyone sins, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous." He's our lawyer. Jesus is our lawyer. And an advocate is a person who pleads the cause of another in a court of law. Catwoman, there's a lot of this Egyptian symbols and things, But what you're going to notice is how she came to be. So you see the witches and all these things, the devil, and Bast. So she's actually a representation of Bast. But when she fell to her death, she was resurrected by the breath of life from a cat. Notice this. And notice she's muddy. She's coming out of the clay just as Adam was. So it's just like they're just twisting everything in the Bible. Why would they have to use any of this Bible stuff? But they're doing it with the villain. Catwoman, I'm not sure about it. Yeah, she is the villain.
Alan Moore is a writer and magician from Northampton. He's a stranger to hairdressers and worships his very own God in his very own way, blurring the lines between religious belief, magic, and the power of the creative imagination.
It's another comic writer.
Alan's familiar on his journey of faith and worship is an ancient Roman glove puppet snake called Glycon. So how did you first go about worshipping Glycon? What form does the worship take?
Well, it's irresistible. He's certainly the coolest, most rock and roll looking god that I've ever seen. I just fell in love at first sight.
What's it for you, though, following Glycon?
We're all of us different emotionally, we're all different physically, intellectually. It would be really odd if we were all the same spiritually. So, I mean, that's why I have a problem with religion per se, because religion, the very word, it comes from the same root word as ligature and ligament, and it means to be bound together in one belief, which I find a bit creepy and a bit unnatural. There are genuine worries that, certainly in America, that this could actually negate science, that it could drag us back into a new dark ages.
So this guy and Grant Morrison, the bald guy, these two are really well-known comic artists that people just love. And he's saying, religion, it's going to take us back to the dark ages. It's a threat to science. But he worships a snake god. And he says it's the most rock and roll and coolest god there is. And he actually gets his inspiration from this god, this snake god. So one is getting inspiration from a false Jesus, a Gnostic Jesus, and the other one's getting it from a snake god. And these are the stories that people are getting. I decided I was going to become a magician. All of a sudden, the lightning bolt hit. It all got a bit strange. For months after that, I was probably in some borderline schizophrenic state. I found myself seemingly in conversation with an entity. Its presence that surrounded my head, moving and speaking lucidly to me. I was very spaced out, God-struck. You babble for a while like an idiot. I must have been unbearable for 2 or 3 months. I've integrated that into the rest of my life. He's integrated what these entities are saying to him into his life, which is comic writing.
On my 40th birthday, rather than merely bore my friends by having anything as mundane as a midlife crisis, I decided it might be more interesting to actually terrify them by going completely mad and declaring myself to be a magician. This had been something that had been coming for a while. It seemed to be a logical end step in my career as a writer. And the problem is that with magic, being in many respects a science of language, you have to be very careful what you say. There is some confusion as to what magic actually is. I think that this can be cleared up if you just look at the very earliest descriptions of magic. Magic, in its earliest form, is often referred to as the art. I believe that this is completely literal. I believe that magic is art, and that art, whether that be writing, music, sculpture, or any other form, is literally magic. Art is, like magic, the science of manipulating symbols, words or images, to achieve changes in consciousness. The very language of magic seems to be talking as much about writing or art as it is about supernatural events. A grimoire, for example, the book of spells, is simply a fancy way of saying grammar. Indeed, to cast a spell is simply to spell, to manipulate words, to change people's consciousness. And
So the closest thing we have in the modern world to a shaman. He's going to change people's consciousness through his art, that he's getting these stories from entities. Here he's just saying more of the same stuff, how people are influenced by comics, more so than like in the church and things like that. Alan Moore, what's he saying here? So he wrote a lot of things. He was known for the movie From Hell, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, The Watchmen, which is a huge comic book. And you'll see Batman, Constantine, Batman, Constantine. So these are his writings have infiltrated these things that we've all grown to love. Batman. Thor, we're going to look at, Thor is also a Norse god, but when you look at the story of the movie, there's an exact parallel, and let's see if you guys can catch it.
I've sacrificed much to achieve peace. For your arrogance and stupidity, you have opened these peaceful realms and innocent lives to the horror and devastation of war. You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy. You are an old man and a fool! You're unworthy! Father, I now take from you your power. I cast you out!
Please open your eyes.
No, this is Earth, isn't it?
Where do you come from?
Did you see any biblical parallels in that? So he was in a heavenly kingdom. His father was God, and he said, I'll take away your powers because you're destroying peace. I'm going to cast you out. And like a bolt of lightning, he fell to, oh, this is earth, isn't it? He fell to earth. This is the hero of the story. Like a bolt of lightning. We see Luke 10:18 says, and he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. This is a direct parallel. Transformers, this one was a shocker to me. But when you're looking at these things through the lens of the Bible, it's so clear.
Before time began, there was the cube. We know not where it comes from, only that it holds the power to create worlds.
The power to create
With life.
and give them
That is
life.
how our race was born. For a time we lived in harmony, but like all great power, some wanted it for good, others for evil, and so began the war.
So he said there's this cube, it created life, or it created planets, and it created life. Think it's a good guy or a bad guy?
Freedom is the right of all sentient beings. You all know there's only one way to end this war. We must destroy the cube.
We must destroy the cube, the being that we don't know where it comes from, but it created the worlds and it gave us life. And he said, freedom. Freedom is what we all deserve. That's true. God gives us freedom. But this isn't the freedom that Satan wants, to do whatever you want, to break the rules. And he said, to get this, we have to destroy the creator that creates worlds and life. X-Men, apocalypse, another biblical term there. You even see a person with angel wings. And apocalypse means appearing, right? No, the apocalypse means to reveal. Yeah, the revelation. So when we hear the word apocalypse, you kind of get these images of doom and destruction of earth and all these things, but really it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's not something to be afraid of unless you're on the wrong side. This is the villain talking. Yahweh. He said, I've been called many things. Ra, Krishna, Yahweh. The villain in the movie called Apocalypse.
Some believe that the first mutant was born thousands of years ago. He was some kind of god, and he's going to rise again.
So he's a god. You're all my children.
Because you follow blind leaders.
This is straight biblical, right? You're all lost because you're following blind leaders. This is the words of Jesus.
And more false gods. And yet now.
He always had 4 followers.
Like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Together we will cleanse the earth. To the
He has 4 followers, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, to cleanse the earth. No more false gods, he says.
He means to destroy his world. Millions of people killed. The world needs the X-Men.
You're gonna join them, aren't you?
When you get out of the house more, right?
It's all of us.
Against the God.
Let's go to war.
Let's go to war. See, these are people who have pretty much put aside being a superhero, but they're like, no, we have to. We have to join this cause to fight the God who calls himself Yahweh and has 4 horsemen and is going to cleanse the earth. And you notice it was with fire. You saw these missiles and rockets and everything. We know that Jesus is coming to destroy the earth, to cleanse the earth with fire, to rid it of all unrighteousness, and to set up an everlasting kingdom. Doctor Strange. There's a newer movie of this one, but man, he's just blatant in your face. It's called The Master of Black Magic. He's called the Master of the Mystic Arts. And black magic is magic involving the supposed invocation of evil spirits for evil purposes. This is the good guy. He's the master of black magic. Deuteronomy 18:10-12 says, "There shall be none found among you, any one that maketh his son or daughter pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee." An abomination is such a terrible sin that God hates it. He puts a word like abomination on it. And yet, all these superheroes are doing this. The writer for Doctor Strange also made these horror movies like Sinister and The Exorcist, or Exorcism, Devil's Knot. The ironic part is that listen to what he says. Scott Derrickson says his Paradise Lost film might lead to sympathy for the devil. I feel a lot of empathy for the Lucifer character in the beginning of the story, director says. This is the director of Doctor Strange. The more interesting thing is we interviewed Derrickson, a Christian with a love for mystery. A Christian who has sympathy for the devil, makes movies called Exorcism and The Devil's Knot and all these things. A Christian with a love for mystery nearly a decade ago. And in 2002, he wrote an article, Behind the Lens, for a Christian century about inhabiting a world of American filmmakers as a Christian. Can you believe that a Christian would make things like this? The master of dark arts. Jesus knows the power of fiction. And Psalms 101:3 says, "I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me." Romans 1:32, this is the one I was trying to remember earlier. It says, "Who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them." So even if we're not doing these acts, if we're taking pleasure in the master of black magic, we're just as guilty. How could we have pleasure in something that's an abomination to God? Matthew 5:27-28 says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So we don't have to commit these things. If we're just thinking on them, dwelling upon them, we're just as guilty as doing them, right? I don't know if anybody's seen any of these documentaries, but what I just covered is covered in full in the replacement gods. Magic Kingdom's all about Disney, which is the same thing. It's all about speaking to the dead. Pocahontas talks to the spirits of the elements. Lion King talks to the dead. Man, there's just so many of them where they talk to the spirits of the dead, and they teach, break the rules and follow your heart. And a lot of magical things like Frozen. Black Panther Deception, we actually have 2 documentaries on those. These are on our YouTube channel as well. And Anime Exposed, which is a huge growing genre of media right now. And so does this make sense to people? Were you guys seeing, I hope nobody thinks I'm just some conspiracy theorist trying to make something out of nothing. I believe that these things have an effect on our mind. That when we're entertaining ourselves with false gods, witchcraft, God being the villain, literally, calling himself Yahweh, I think this is preparing the masses, preparing the minds of the people to fight against Christ when he comes, to side with the beast power. And I believe that when we're entertaining ourselves with this, we're opening ourselves up. We're inviting the enemy into our home. When we have these DVDs on our shelf and these posters and we wear the t-shirts, those are an invitation to the enemy. I think that the enemy has a lot of ways to get into our life, including, Ouija boards and tarot cards and even a statue from TJ Maxx if it's a Buddha or something, but also in movies and music and things like that. Do you have a question? That's right. And we are to guard the avenues of the soul. We be careful, little eyes, what we see. Be careful, little ears, what we hear. All these things, we say it, but do we put it into practice, And I understand that these are tough things to hear, and we can't do it in our own strength. That's all I can say. When I got freed from addiction to marijuana, alcohol, movies, all these things, I had to tell God to strengthen me. I told him, I said, I don't want these in my life, but I keep failing. Every time I try to put it down, I go back to it. So Lord, I'm giving you permission. Take this out of my life. I was saying things like I'm going to cut back, but cutting back just meant I was still holding on. I had to cut ties altogether, and I had to give God permission to take it from me, because he's not a thief. He's not going to take things out of your life that you're cherishing in any kind of way. So did you have a question?
Well, I was going to say, Mikey and I were talking at lunch. As a child of the 70s, it was not as blatant as it is now, but it was still there.
Yeah.
We were talking about Bewitched, was on television that I grew up watching. That was witchcraft. And I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah.
It was a genie.
Right. Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Openly Yahweh.
Yes.
It shows how far we've come just in 50 years.
It really does.
How blatant they can be, and society is accepting of it.
That's right. Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. It's like it's always kind of been there, but it's been sugar-coated in a way, and it's all these kind of parallels. But now it's, you got shows like Lucifer, you got Hellboy, he's the superhero. You got an anime now called The 7 Deadly Sins, where each hero is a personification of a sin, and the bad guy is the 10 Commandments. Literally, the bad guy are 10 evil beings that are representations of the commandments. It's not just a cool name for the villains. No, they actually represent each of the commandments. And the 7 deadly sins, they represent each of the sins. Like pride, they have to act out their sins to keep their power. So pride would be like, I'm the best, and he's acting it out. And so we've gotten to a place now, and when we researched that, there was no Christians pointing this out. Something is blatant in your face, and nobody's even batting an eye at it. And that's where we've gotten with society, and it's mostly because we say, well, it's fiction, it doesn't affect me, but we know that fiction does have an influence. That's why there's a cancel culture, representation. That's why we tell stories with good morals, because they are powerful. Let's pray. Lord Father in heaven, we just thank you so much for your truth. We thank you that you are coming again soon. We thank you that we are on your side, Lord. Help us to walk with you daily. Help us to put away anything that offends you, anything that you consider an abomination, Lord. Change our tastes, Lord. You can transform us. You can renew our minds. You can make us a new creature, Lord. The things that I used to love, I despise now because of you, Lord. And I thank you for that power that you've given us if we are willing to ask you for it. And I just pray that you would help us to surrender these things, that you would help us to fill that void with something positive, something that glorifies you, and just help us to be a witness to others who are seeing these things. Help us to point out these things to people so that they can see that we are in a real spiritual war, that there's a war making people side with the enemy and going against you, Lord. Help us to use these as a discussion point to reach people. And we just love you and thank you for all that you've done for us. And we thank you that you're coming again soon. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.